Excellencies, friends, colleagues, my name is Yuri de Boer. I chair a Council of Europe expert committee addressing the human rights of intersex persons, operating under the Steering Committee on Anti-discrimination, Diversity and Inclusion. As part of our mandate, we have drafted a recommendation, the first international legal instrument devoted specifically to intersex persons, pending adoption by the Committee of Ministers next month. Why this instrument and why now? Because despite long-standing concerns voiced by Council of Europe bodies, including the Commissioner for Human Rights, the Parliamentary Assembly and the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, as well as other European and international institutions and civil society, across our region, intersex persons continue to face a pattern of harms. These harms include medically unnecessary interventions performed without the person's prior, free, informed and expressed consent, obstacles to obtaining medical records, and barriers to justice and remedy, violence, bullying, as well as discrimination in education, employment, housing, and healthcare. The UN High Commissioner's report before this session also traces these violations as well as their root causes. The explanatory memorandum accompanying our draft Council of Europe recommendation sets out the background, evidence, international human rights framework, and practical guidance, as well as examples to support implementation by member states. It notes how intersex people face elevated violence, harassment, and discrimination, driven by entrenched stereotypes and gaps in hate crime and hate speech law, as well as equality protections. The text is also informed by positive developments. 6 Council of Europe member states prohibit non-consensual normalizing medical interventions on variations of sex characteristics in law, and others have other restrictions. More states are incorporating the ground of sex characteristics in hate crime and hate speech provisions and equality frameworks, action plans, and the mandates of national equality and human rights bodies. The draft recommendation and its explanatory memorandum are built on existing Council of Europe standards, as well as case law of the European Court of Human Rights, pairing human rights standards with practical tools for oversight. It reflects a broad and inclusive consultative process, drawing on lived experience of intersex persons, as well as medical and ethical expertise. One of its core pillars is the legal prohibition of medical interventions on the sex characteristics of intersex persons without their prior, free and informed consent. This responds to long-standing concerns voiced by the Council of Europe that such interventions, often performed in infancy or early childhood, violate rights to bodily integrity, autonomy and dignity. To that end, the draft recommendation outlines very clearly that interventions which are not strictly necessary to avert an imminent threat to life or serious physical harm should be postponed until the individual can provide personal and informed consent. Moreover, it establishes stringent procedural safeguards in the rare cases where interventions may be considered before a child reaches maturity. These safeguards include comprehensive information, consultation, independent oversight and robust documentation to ensure the child's best interests and that the right to express their views are respected according to age and maturity. It also recognizes that discrimination and harm do not begin or end in the hospital or operating theater. It outlines principles for protecting intersex persons across key life domains: birth registration and legal gender recognition, access to justice and remedies, protections from hate crime and hate speech, inclusive education, family life, and access to healthcare, employment, and sport. This comprehensive approach addresses structural and intersectional discrimination faced by intersex persons throughout their lives. The draft also emphasizes the need for member states to develop evidence-based national legal and policy frameworks, to gather data disaggregated by sex characteristics, to train professionals across sectors, particularly in health, education, and justice, and to provide intersex people and their families with adequate information and support, including access to peer-led networks, ensuring that intersex persons can meaningfully participate in these democratic processes. The Council of Europe's strength lies not only in setting standards, but in supporting its member states in applying them through assistance and cooperation. In short, this recommendation could offer a robust normative framework and a practical roadmap for states to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of intersex persons in a comprehensive and sustainable manner. In shaping our recommendation, we drew on the work of the United Nations treaty bodies, the CRC, CAT, the Human Rights Committee, CRPD, and CEDAW. We also recognize the valuable reports and guidance of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the African Commission on Humans and People's Rights. We see strong value in structured exchanges and standard setting, case law and clinical guidance, and are ready to collaborate and share good practices. It is our firm belief that those whose rights are at stake must be recognized not as passive recipients, but as active agents in shaping the policies and laws that affect their lives. From the outset, drafting has been rooted in engagement with intersex persons and intersex-led organizations, whose insights, expertise, and testimonies have been central to the text. The recommendation would encourage member states to ensure that intersex persons and organizations working on intersex human rights are included in the full policy cycle, from the development of policies to the implementation and evaluation. This requires mechanisms that embed intersex voices into the institutional fabric, such as advisory councils and formalized partnerships. One-off consultations are not sufficient. Participation must be structured, adequately resourced, and sustained. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Council of Europe and our expert committee stand ready with guidance, legislative support, and peer learning to make these standards real in people's lives. Thank you for your attention.